Texas has cornered the market on breaks, the CFP poll's full of mistakes, and the Rams just traded for one of the greats. All this and more on College Crossfire.
He's coming back for that 2021 MVP. He's better than Josh Allen. He's better than Baker Mayfield. He's not better than Mahomes. I can't say that.
Well, Justin Tucker gives him his 99 rating in Madden.
Ceiling is the roof. There is no roof, so they have a pretty high ceiling.
That's enough talk. Let's talk. Welcome to College Crossfire. I'm your host, Drew Jacob. Let's make the rounds. On first base, we've got Adam. Adam, happy to see you. How you been?
Yeah, good to be back. Looking for number 3 in a row. So excited.
Number 3.
Got some great panelists here. It should be a good one tonight.
You're stacking them so high, I almost lost count. Didn't realize we're going for 3. And Jaxon, how you feeling?
Pretty good. Adam stole a win from me last time. So I went back to get my revenge, so we'll see how it plays out.
Very, very interesting. We'll have to see how it shakes out. And Evan, what about you?
You know, I'm 0 for 2 this year, so maybe if he can get his third, maybe I can get my first. So
It makes you feel any better? I am also 0 for 2
Exactly.
for my career record. But it's still anyone's game because we haven't even started yet. Starting off on a down note, well, what's there even left to talk about with Texas football? At 4-4 on the season, they're not exactly knocking on the door to the Big 12 title game. Frankly, it might take some luck for them to even get to the Cheez-It Bowl at this point. All that said, it's at least interesting that all of their losses in their last 3 games have been so similar, with 3 consecutive second-half collapses against 3 ranked teams. So, I don't know, while we're here, we might as well get to the bottom of it. Adam, starting off with you, what is the reason for Texas's recent second-half woes?
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, they've been outscored 75-27 in the past 3 second halves. And if you look at, I think it really starts with the offense. You go look at Oklahoma State. They don't score a touchdown in the final 27 minutes after Bijan gets one. And again against Baylor, they don't score a touchdown in the final quarter and a half after Bijan scores on a rushing touchdown. So it's been that failure of production. I think what they're really missing from these last 2 games is the production of Jordan Whittington across the middle. You look, their leading receiver for the last 2 games is Marcus Washington. He's a good, decent receiver on the outside. Not exactly who you want as your leading receiver. Against Oklahoma State, he had 60 yards. 58 of those came on 1 catch. He did have 7 catches for 70 yards against Baylor, but then Josh Moore is struggling with drops. So I think the offensive line is still shaky as usual. Texas can't run the ball. Bijan Robinson only had 43 yards against Baylor, 2.5 yards per carry, and they're just missing Whittington. They're missing that solid second receiver to complement Worthy. The offense is stalling out too much in the second half, and it's giving their defense, they're on the field too much. They're trying out, and Texas getting absolutely run over in the second half.
Yeah, Whittington being MIA feels like it's a tale as old as time at this point. But you bring up a good point, too. Something about the running game in the second half, just Bijan cannot, get consistent yardage. So, yeah, just definitely not enough production. Jaxon, on to you.
So this team kind of feels like it's kind of depressed and a little uninspired. The first half, Longhorns can beat any team in the country. We've seen that with performances against Oklahoma, even Baylor last week, and Oklahoma State. But in the second half, they just kind of seem to get complacent with a large lead, and so they're just kind of letting these small cracks form in the offense and the defense, and it's showing up in the final score. The Longhorns last week were 3 for 14 on third downs. They actually had a better percentage converting fourth downs than they did third. So it's this offense just. Defenses after the first half of game planning against Bijan Robinson, the second half they're not impressed by Casey Thompson being able to sling the ball. So they're just stacking the box, and it's being successful because Whittington, like Adam said, has been absent because he's been hurt, and it just gives the spotlight on Worthy and Bijan. So you can't just have a two-faced offense with just 2 players running the entire thing. You've got to get more consistent production out of everyone else in the offense.
Absolutely. No, it's like these teams are daring Texas to beat them through the air in the second half, and they're just not quite able to. I like your point, too, about the mindset. Obviously we can't get in the heads of these players, but just observing their body language, it clearly seems like there's something going wrong in the second half. Anyway, rounding out the question, we've got Evan.
Well, I just think it comes down to every part of this team does not look good. I think we look at the defense, and it's just a slow defense. I really don't know where it comes from, if it's a coaching problem with Kwiatkowski, if it's a recruiting problem, or just conditioning. But the whole defense just looks so behind when they're playing against the other team. Brockermeyer is getting burnt on every play. Our defensive backs getting burnt over top and on the outside all the time. And I think we need to start giving a little bit of blame to 2 people who've kind of been able to avoid it this season, which I think is Casey Thompson, I think is Bijan Robinson. I mean, Thompson in the last 3 games is averaging about 8 yards a pass, which for a Big 12 quarterback is pretty abysmal. That's not what you want to see from your quarterback. He has no presence in the run game, which is something that we kind of expected from him this year, and he just isn't a threat on the ground. And Bijan Robinson, I mean, he's a great running back. He's not a problem for this team, but if we're going to call him the best running back in the country, a Heisman candidate, like a lot of fans of Texas have been doing, we can't have him be in the second half just disappearing. You don't see Kenneth Walker doing that. You don't see Breece Hall doing that. You don't see even Sean Tucker for Syracuse doing that. Robinson really just disappears in the second half. Maybe it's a coaching problem, but at some point you have to say the individuals of Thompson and Robinson need to step up. Maybe it's time for a change. Maybe it's Hudson Card's time. I know, crazy take, but Hudson Card was not playing as awful as Casey Thompson has the last 3 games.
Very interesting. I think I'm going to go ahead and say I do think a little bit too much blame thrown out to the skill position players. I don't think anyone could argue that Bijan wouldn't be that All-American Heisman level guy if he was running behind an even average offensive line. That being said, still no excuse for it. So for this one, Adam, you're going to get 3, Jaxon the 2, and Evan, you're getting the 1. Shifting gears now to the relevant teams in the sport. The first college football playoff poll of the season just dropped last night, and as usual, a lot of people had a lot of opinions. Controversy was the story of the top 25 list, as allegations of a Power 5 bias, albeit more specifically about the SEC and the Big Ten, reared their heads yet again. For this question specifically, I'd like to get y'all's thoughts on the top 6, which of course dictates the 4 playoff teams and the first 2 that are currently left out. And based on the answers you give, I'm pretty sure you know exactly why I said top 6. On this one, we're starting with Jaxon.
All right, so I think 2 of the top 6 positions are right where they should be. That's Georgia and Michigan State. Michigan State has done an excellent job behind Kenneth Walker building a great season. But these other 4 teams, I'm not so sure about. Let's start with Alabama. Nick Saban once said that it's better to win ugly than lose pretty. And it does not, it seems like the opposite of how the college football playoff is thinking. Cincinnati has won very ugly games, and the games that they should win, they've won very convincingly. Alabama on the other side, they've looked good, and I guess that's why they're ranked number 2, but they still have that glaring loss to Texas A&M. Number 4, Oregon, has one of the best wins in the country over Ohio State. I'm not so angry that they're number 4, but their one loss has come to Stanford, and they're ranked above Ohio State, who's looked astounding since they lost to Oregon in week 2. So this rankings it's all thrown up in the air, and it seems hopefully over these next few weeks that the college football playoff will get their heads on their shoulders and give more credit to Cincinnati that they deserve.
Absolutely, and you bring up Oregon. The strange thing about them, they obviously have a worse loss than Alabama. They also have a better win. So it's interesting, your wins matter less than your losses. It's almost a signal they're sending. Anyway, Evan, on to you.
I think, Drew, what you said about the Power 5 bias is definitely evident, because I think between these kind of 1 through 8 teams, maybe you can say Georgia's in a league of their own, but I think from, let's say, 2 to 8, they're all very similar teams, and at some point the College Football Playoff Committee has to kind of use the eye test to look at these teams and say a lot of these teams are either 1-loss or no-loss teams, but a lot of these 1 losses, like Oregon, was bad, but for Ohio State was good. Even though they lost to Oregon, you could say eye test-wise, since that loss, which was all the way in week 2, they're a much better team. Obviously, I think Cincinnati should definitely be in this top 4. I think right now Michigan State and Georgia are the 2 best teams in the country after Michigan State beat Michigan. I think Alabama probably should sneak into that 3 spot. And then Cincinnati, that win over Notre Dame was really, really good. And I think right now they're playing really good football. Even though some of their wins are kind of sneaking by, I think in general they look really good. I think the teams after them, I don't think Oregon looks as good as Cincinnati does. I don't think even Ohio State looks as good as they could look. I think that Ohio State will probably sneak in just because they want a Big Ten team in there. But I really think Cincinnati got pretty swindled in the rankings this time around.
Absolutely. You have to wonder, look, I think everybody expected Cincinnati to be top 4 here and probably get jumped as the season went on. But starting them at 6, where can they even go? Anyway, Adam, on to you.
Yeah, I guess the committee, what they're maybe afraid of is putting Cincinnati too high, kind of what they did with TCU all the way back in the first one, where TCU was 3, and they dropped them to number 5 after TCU beat Iowa State by almost 50. But you look at this year's rankings. I think obviously Georgia, league of their own. I agree with Evan. I think Michigan State should be number 2. They're undefeated. They have a quality win against a top 10 opponent in Michigan. Alabama has that loss to A&M. Losses should count, College Football Playoff Committee, and then they've only beaten the 2 Mississippi schools. So not as quality of a win in Michigan State. I think Cincinnati should be number 4 for some of the reasons that the other panelists have mentioned. Oregon has that glaring loss to Stanford. They almost lost to Cal. They were messing around with Cal, who was 1-5 at the time. on a Friday night. So they had that quality win over Ohio State. And you look at Ohio State, they don't have as great of a quality win either. I think you call Penn State probably their best win. Their other quality win against a ranked team comes against a Minnesota team that probably shouldn't be ranked because they lost to a 3-6 Bowling Green team. So you start kind of stacking these teams up, and then don't get me started on Oklahoma and Michigan. I think I should put Oklahoma or Michigan, especially since they're undefeated. So basically where I'd go Georgia number 1, Michigan State number 2 because they're undefeated, Bama number 3 because it's SEC and the playoff committee loves them. Cincy should slot in there at number 4 because they're undefeated and they beat a top 10 team. And then you go 5 and 6 with Oregon because they beat Ohio State with the Buckeyes in at 6.
You know, touching on teams like Minnesota and the Mississippi teams, I'm not alleging anything, but you almost start to wonder if certain teams are only ranked so that other teams have ranked wins. I'm just saying. And what else I'm saying is that, Evan, you're getting the 3 on this one, Adam the 2, and Jaxon the 1. Very close scoring on that. All right, everyone, it's time to shout out the team of destiny, the little engine that could, the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. Despite not climbing up the ranks of the CFP poll, undefeated Wake still made some history of their own, achieving both their first ever 8-0 start and their first ever AP Top 10 ranking in school history. In fact, up until last Sunday, Wake was quite literally the only Power 5 team to have never cracked the AP Top 10. The AP poll having been around since 1936, mind you. The past is the past. Your question today pertains to the future. Can Wake Forest run the table? And if they do, will that incredibly weak schedule of theirs prevent them from gaining the respect of the committee? And on this one, we're starting with Evan.
You know, I think they can, and I think they will run the table. Right now, their only opponents that really look like a struggle for them is NC State, who's ranked right now. I know you called out the AP rankings, so who knows what we're saying with that. But NC State has a really legit defense, probably the best in the ACC, and I think that could be a struggle with this kind of weak schedule Wake Forest had so far. They also play Clemson. I think any other year that would be a problem game, but Clemson this year is just not the same as they have in the past. I think Wake Forest will win out, and I think it's going to be a very strong team. But also, from what it seems like the other schedules of the other top teams, they're behind, I think it's 8 teams right now, and I just don't see 4 of those 8 teams losing. And I doubt we see Wake Forest leapfrog Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State. I wish Cincinnati, probably won't happen, but I think right now what we'll see is that Wake Forest will win out, maybe get to like the top 6, but I just doubt they get into the playoff with such a weak schedule that they have in the ACC.
Absolutely. I mean, you have to wonder, is the ACC even better than the American this year? It's a legitimate question. Adam, on to you.
I don't think Wake Forest will win out. You've already looked. They've had a couple of close calls already. They only beat Syracuse and Louisville each by 3 points. So they barely skirted by those teams. And their next 3 games are tough ones. North Carolina is down this year, but you never know. Going on the road there, that could be a tricky game. And then, like Evan mentioned, North Carolina State, who's the other ranked team, and then Clemson. I think out of those next 3 games, I think Wake Forest is going to trip up on one of them. And then even if they were to win out, they got a heck of a quarterback in Sam Hartman. He can lead this offense to just about anywhere. But I think even if they were to win out, I think they're going to need the Pac-12 champ to have 2 losses. They're probably going to need the Big 12 champ to have 2 losses. Cincinnati's going to have to lose. I think a 2-loss Alabama is getting in over Wake Forest. So there's a lot that would need to happen. It'd have to be chaos in front of them. I don't think it'll be an issue, though, because I don't think they'll win out.
Ooh, 2-loss Bama getting in over an undefeated Power 5. Or were you saying 1 loss or undefeated in that scenario?
No, 2-loss Bama, because they would lose again to Georgia.
Right. In that scenario where they get in over Wake, would that be undefeated Wake?
Yeah, undefeated Wake.
That would be. I'm not saying it wouldn't happen, but oh boy. And Jaxon, on to you.
So that might set the college football playoff on fire, but I think even if Wake Forest wins out, I think a New Year's Six Bowl is probably the best chance that they've got. They would need a ton of help to get in the college football playoff. I agree with Adam that Sam Hartman's been one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Got close to 25 touchdowns, very few picks, and he's top 6 in QBR in the country. So this Wake Forest team has done a great job improving upon that 4-5 record, including losing the final 3 games of their season last year. But the only thing I think that is slowing them down is their next 4 games are probably the toughest 4 games of the season. They have NC State, North Carolina, Clemson, and Boston College. All those teams are 500 or better. So if you can get past those teams, I think you have a really good spot at the table to get into the playoff. But I just think with the rest of the field being so crowded this year that I think Wake Forest is one of the first teams out.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree. Just the resume doesn't stack up. Regardless, Wake, whatever happens, we love you and we're proud of you. When we come back, we'll be talking the start of basketball season and the NFL trade deadline. You won't want to miss it. And actually, we are at a tie right now, a three-way tie that would have been pretty appropriate for the Halloween episode because we are tied at 6. 6, 6, 6. Get it? 3 panelists. Moving on. Let's just jump back in. So depending on the team, we're about 6 or 7 games into the NBA season. The fact that we're so early on in the year hasn't stopped headlines from getting made about the Knicks' hot start or the Suns' relative struggles. A lot of overreactions all around. There's obviously a lot of games left to be played, but panelists, what team or player has surprised you the most up to this point? And on this one, we're starting with Adam.
Yeah, how about the Warriors? They showed them there in that first highlight. Obviously, I think this is a Golden State team. A lot of people thought, obviously a playoff team in the West, but kind of a middle of the pack playoff team. But they're up to a 5-1 start, and their only loss came in overtime by 3 points. The Grizzlies have already beaten the Lakers and the Clippers. Damian Lee looks fantastic. He's averaging 14 points per game along with Jordan Poole. You got Steph Curry doing his thing. Klay Thompson's coming back in a couple months. Andre Iguodala's back in his natural habitat. This Warriors team has a lot of pieces, and when Klay Thompson comes back, they're going to get that much better. So I think they've gone from maybe a middle of the pack, kind of 5, 6, 7 seed kind of in there, to maybe even a Western Conference contender based on this start through the first week or two.
I like to reward bold takes, and that's pretty sizzly for this early on in the season. Anyway, Jaxon, on to you next.
So I'm going to go with the Boston Celtics. Very slow season. This team, their teamwork has deteriorated over the past couple months, as seen with the players-only meeting they called the day before tonight's Magic game. This team has not been gelling together well these first few games of the season. Stat-wise, they're all looking pretty okay, except for Marcus Smart, who recently called out Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum for not passing the ball more to him, but he's been shooting some of the lowest numbers on the team. This team needs to band back together. They still have 70, 75 games left in the season to fix these woes, but if they don't start gelling together soon, then it's going to translate into losses that they're going to need back. Losses that they're going to need back at the end of the season. The ship has not sunk yet, but the ship has leaked, and it's a pretty big leak, so they need to work together to fix this leak in order to get back on the right track.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, like you said, the dreaded players-only meeting. You never like hearing about that. So, Evan, we got you next.
Here my hometown bias is going to come out. It's the Wizards right now. I mean, who's playing better than the Wizards right now? We have 4 scorers above 15 points this season. Kyle Kuzma and Montrezl Harrell are averaging double-doubles. They look like 2 of the best offseason adds by any team this season. Better than Westbrook, might I say. Bradley Beal looks like a top 15 scorer like he had been last season, but now there's more players around him to support. It's an 11-man rotation that keeps going every game, even with injuries, which there have been about 5 injuries so far the Wizards this year. Yeah, they're still 5-3. Took a loss tonight, but it's all right. Rui Hachimura should come back in the next 2 weeks, and right now the team is kind of cruising, and it looks like they're prepped to be a playoff team, which not a lot of people thought coming in. And they could definitely surprise some people because there's a lot of great young role players who could really step it up in the playoffs, like Rui Hachimura, like Daniel Gafford, or even Corey Kispert, the rookie this year. They look really good, and I mean, we usually don't get to see great Wizards basketball, so I'm all for it.
Wizards is a playoff team. I'm going to hold you to that when the time comes. But for now, you're getting the 3, Adam the 2, and Jaxon the 1. Perhaps the only blockbuster trade we saw before the NFL's deadline, the Rams have agreed to send their 2nd and 3rd round picks in the 2022 draft to the Denver Broncos in exchange for 8-time Pro Bowler Von Miller. Additionally, the Rams are on the hook for almost all of the $9.7 million salary Miller's owed for the remainder of the season. It looks like LA is going all in to win it all right now. So I ask this. With the addition of Von Miller, are the Rams now the favorite to win the NFC? And Jaxon, starting with you.
I'm going to pump the brakes just a little bit on that take. I still think the Cowboys are a better team in the NFC. I believe their running game is much better because the Rams don't have Cam Akers, who's supposed to be their star workhorse back. Now, Darrell Henderson has been playing great as his replacement, but I think the Zeke and Tony Pollard are much better. Plus, I think the defense, while both defenses are some of the best in the NFL, I feel like the Cowboys are a little bit more opportunistic at the right times. This is not to say that Von Miller will not be a good player to the defense. It'll certainly help draw a lot of attention from Aaron Donald. But spending a 2nd and 3rd round pick on a player who still does not have 10 tackles this season, given his sack numbers are still pretty good, that's a pretty big issue for someone who will not even play 10 games for your franchise.
Ooh, interesting take on Von Miller. You're right though about 10 tackles, and I like your point too. But the Cowboys defense, they bend a little, but they've established this ball hawking identity this season. It's come in clutch very often. Evan, on to you next.
I'm gonna disagree with you. I'm calling the Rams for the #1 team in the NFC this season. I don't think right now specifically they are the single best team. I think you'd probably give that to the Packers after their win last week. But I think as the season goes on, as we enter the playoffs, this Rams team is going to be scary, and I think the weaknesses that they have are going to get plugged up by the end. I know you called out the Akers injury, but Darrell Henderson, in very limited attempts, has been very efficient as a running back. Matthew Stafford has looked amazing this year in a new system. Cooper Kupp's acting like one of the best wide receivers in the league, and I think they have a really underrated receiving core after him with Robert Woods, who's still not putting up the greatest numbers, still really good pass catcher. Van Jefferson's breaking out this year. Tyler Higbee's good, and they have a great offensive line to support that offense. I think the real question mark was the defense this season, and though it's kind of shaky still, I think what Von Miller brings is an already amazing pass rush with Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd. He'll bring a super hard to block pass rushing tandem. When they rush 4, I mean, you have to double team Donald, and then Miller and Floyd on the edge are going to eat up all these left and right tackles. I think what is kind of underrated about Miller, though you pointed out his low tackles, what he does great is set the edge on the run game, and I think a lot of teams are going to be forced to run into Aaron Donald now, which they used to not have to do when they could run it kind of outside the tackle. But I think that's what Von Miller can really shore up. And with Rapp and Fuller in the secondary, along with Jalen Ramsey, I think they'll be much better at stopping the passing game. And I think with these young defense around Donald and Miller, they should get better as the season progresses. And I think they should be the team to get to the Super Bowl this year.
Excellent point about the Rams 4-man rush. I mean, when they're running that, who and how are you going to stop it? Anyway, Adam, on to you next.
I'm going to agree with Jaxon. I don't think this makes the Rams the favorite. The Cardinals beat them by 3 scores earlier this season. Yeah. I don't think one player fixes a 3-score deficit. I think Von Miller is a great addition to their defense. But you start looking around the NFC, and it's not just the Cardinals. This is a fantastic Cardinals team. Obviously, had that loss to the Packers. They've got a ton of offensive weapons, but you start looking at the Cowboys, too. The Cowboys went to Minnesota with Cooper Rush and won a football game. They have freaking Cedric Wilson throwing 35-yard passes. He had 80 yards receiving, and that's not to mention they've still got CeeDee Lamb, Amari Cooper. Jaxon mentioned the dynamic duo of Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard. Michael Gallup might not be far away from returning. This is a Cowboys offense with a lot of weapons. They beat the Chargers on the road, beat the Patriots on the road. So I think the Cowboys are up there. The Cardinals have already beaten this Rams team once. And you've got the Packers, who even without Devontae Adams, beat that Cardinals team. So I think it's a 4-way race right now. I wouldn't install the Rams as the favorites just yet. They've looked a little bit shaky, especially 2 weeks ago against the Lions. They blew the Texans this past week. But I think Cardinals, Cowboys, and Packers are still right up there, and maybe the Rams just slightly behind.
Excellent. Honestly, you convinced me of your argument. Just between the Arizona loss and the general crowding at the top, I really don't think you can call the Rams a clear-cut favorite. So for that, you're getting the 3, Evan will be getting the 2, and Jaxon the 1. When we come back, it's time to put tonight's panel on the hot seat with rapid fire. You won't want to miss it. One panelist awarded 2 points, and the other 2 getting absolutely nothing. In other words, that means it's time for rapid fire, which means it's anyone's game. Love the enthusiasm. That seems that Halloween was pretty bananas for Texas special teams coach Jeff Banks, as a monkey belonging to his girlfriend, who goes by Pole Assassin, mind you, see if you can guess what her line of work is, attacked and bit a trick-or-treater who came by the house. So, panelists, assuming monkeys are a no-go, what pet do you think would be more suited to be owned by a member of Texas's coaching staff given the season so far? Anyone can jump in.
Well, I'm going to go with another animal. I believe it's the baboon that has the bear butt. Am I correct? I'm going to go with Steve Sarkisian's baboon, who shows his butt in the second half. I mean, his first drive, it's always very pretty up front, always starts off with a touchdown. But when you go around to the back and you see a lot of these other issues and seeing Texas stall on all these different offensive drives, it doesn't help to have your butt shown to your opponent. Doesn't lead to good things.
No one can see, but in my notes I wrote LOL at the bear butt thing. Very appropriate. Who else?
This is a pretty standard answer. I'm going to go with the house cat because, the cats, they kind of hang around. They come out to eat. You see them for a little bit, and they just disappear. It's kind of like the Texas offense in the second half. They go do their own thing, and they come back for a little bit. Texas comes back. First half next week is great, and they disappear again. So we'll go with the disappearing house cat for the pet the Longhorns need.
Love it. Absolutely. Another very accurate metaphor.
You kind of took the idea I was going for, because I was going to go for a grizzly bear, because when we come out on the defense, we're mauling the other team's offense, and then we go into hibernation. We just go to sleep for the rest of the second half. So I mean, if there's any animal we could have as a pet, it would be a bear that goes to sleep.
Love it. Very good work, you guys. Seems like great minds kind of think alike. We're all sort of on the same page. That being said, Jaxon is going to get the points for this one, just for the bear butt thing, I think, being edging it out as the most clever answer. 36-year-old future Hall of Famer Adrian Peterson is back in the NFL. After the injury to star running back Derrick Henry, the Tennessee Titans looked to the 2010 Stars to give them some much-needed depth at the position. This got us thinking, which recently or not so recently retired athlete across any and all sports do you guys think could still perform if their respective league called them in? Anyone can jump in.
You know, I think even though it's been, I want to say like 6 years since he retired, I still think right now Calvin Johnson could come right back into the league and still dominate as a receiver. I mean, he was just an athletic freak, and you know, he's obviously lost some of it now, and he might not be a number one like he used to be, but when he retired, he was at the top of his game. I don't believe there were too many injury problems, but he really looked like the best receiver in the NFL for most of his career. I think even now he'd be a veteran, but he'd still be pretty good. And I think if they put him on the lines, he'd definitely be better than their best receiver. Like, I don't think Quintez Cephas is better than Calvin Johnson now, even though he's been out of the league for 5 years. So no offense to Quintez Cephas, but
I think he's still got it. He's absolutely still got it. He quit because he was fed up, not because he couldn't go anymore.
yeah.
Anyone else?
Look, a player I'd be interested to see, this might strike a chord, Jaxon. I'd be interested to see Andrew Luck. Obviously, he dealt with kind of some injuries and stuff like that, but I mean, he's only been out of the league for 2 years. He retired relatively young, and you look at some of the quarterbacks starting the league right now. You got Mike White showing out, Taylor Heineke. You got Davis Mills. Davis Mills, for the Texans. And so, I mean, you start looking at that and you say, well, could Andrew Luck maybe do a better job than that? So if he could stay healthy, he's still young enough where I think he could do a job for a team in the league.
I think so. Another solid answer. Another guy's career got cut too short anyway. And Jaxon, that leaves you.
I think I'm going to go with Roger Clemens, a little bit out of left field, or I guess the bullpen. But yeah, he's very old. But if you do remember, a couple years ago, Roger Clemens was pitching in the minor leagues up until he was like age 50. True. So if there's anybody that you can call on to play any professional sport in their 50s or early 60s, probably be the guy that's already done. I'm going to go with Roger Clemens.
This one was tight, but because really solid answers, but I'm going to have to give Evan the points on this one because I do believe out of all the players mentioned, Megatron is the one who could have the most impact back in the league. So Evan, you're getting the points on that one and the win. We do not have time for FaceTime. So sorry. Let's scroll down to the outro. Congratulations, Evan. Everyone. Yeah, congratulations, Evan, and thank you all for tuning in to tonight's episode of College Crossfire. Don't forget to follow us on social media at TSTV Sports on Twitter and Instagram. Lastly, be sure to wake up with the 1-0 Sports Show Friday mornings at 10 a.m. For all the panelists and everyone in the studio and Master Control, I'm Drew Jacob. Have a wonderful evening, and good riddance, Gary Patterson.